welcome to another English Sparkling with Tweedy video. Today, Nyetimber Rose. There we go, Nyetimber's Rose. Like the classic cuvee, this is a multi-vintage, and I actually have looked up the code on the back for the vintage breakdown. It's predominantly 2021, hopefully I'm showing you that on screen here. Is it 80-something% from 2021, and then the rest of it from earlier vintages. That also has the grape breakdown. It's sort of Pinot dominant, as you, I guess, expect for a rosé. Or as I always say, there's no reason why it absolutely has to be Pinot dominant. I suppose you could have a Chardonnay dominant rosé as long as at least enough Pinot in there, made as a red wine, to give it that colour. Now, I think this possibly has a few things working against it. While I'm babbling on here, I might put the ice jacket back on. I picked this up from Waitrose today, and it wasn't really a very planned choice. I often just go into these shops that I know have at least a few English sparklings and then just pick up whatever I think looks interesting or reasonable, or sometimes swayed by what's on special offer. This was on special offer. I think it came in at sort of 31 or 32 pounds, and it actually normally at full price I think often retails for slightly more than the classic cuvee. I was a bit concerned about its position in the shop. This is a Waitrose that has a big glass window at one end of its wine section, and they've just moved things around, so the sparkling wines particularly were further into the store originally, but I don't know if you can see from this shot I'm showing you on screen now, it's worryingly a bit close to the window, and it's been a sunny day today and it was pretty sunny yesterday, so a little bit concerned about that. Nyetimber, this is one of the things I think they are very good at. They never use clear glass as some producers do, even for their rosés, and some producers just want to show off the colour of the wine, so that avoids this lesser known wine fault called light strike, and that's something that Brad Greatrix, one of their winemakers, has as a sort of personal quest to try and stamp that out for the whole industry. I believe as well the actual, it's going to be very hard to see here, it just looks black, doesn't it, but the actual colour of this glass when you look at it in the light, rather than the sort of more traditional green, is a kind of ambery brownish colour, and I think I recall Brad Greatrix saying at some point that that also helps to reduce this risk of light strike, of sunlight having a damaging effect on the wine. Another thing which might work against this Nyetimber is serving temperature. I bought this earlier this afternoon, bunged it in the fridge as soon as I got home, but it's only really had 2 hours in the coolest part. It's a reasonably hot day. I think it got up to 27 or 28 degrees centigrade earlier. Put it in this ice jacket. I don't know if that's going to do much more than just maintain whatever temperature it was at in the fridge. I'm not sure it would become even more chilled in transit. The third thing that is possibly working against this is, I generally like Nyetimber as a producer, but I have to admit in the past I haven't really warmed to their rosés so much. It sometimes comes across as a little bit sweet. Now, I think sweetness in wine is a really interesting discussion, especially in sparkling wine. Again, there's this little code on the back of the bottle. You can look that up on their website and you can see for this specific batch of wine the exact dosage level. So I did that earlier. Again, I'll put this on screen. It's 10 grams a litre, which is very much in the middle of that brut. I mean, it's perhaps slightly towards the higher end. It can be called brut if it's in the range of 6 to 12 grams per litre of sugar. I thought it might be interesting to put these in context. Coca-Cola, for example, has somewhere in the region of 100 grams a litre. Is it 108? But it is also balanced by acid. Coca-Cola is actually slightly more acidic than your average English sparkling wine or champagne. There are all these other factors going on, including serving temperature, changes our perception of sweetness, and acidity. More acidic things taste less sweet, but it doesn't mean they have less sugar in them. The bottle feels cold, at least on the outside. Fingers crossed. One thing I remember about Nyetimber's classic cuvee is it's actually surprisingly drinkable even when it's a little bit above the recommended serving temperature. Right, well, it has a decent mousse on it. I found this in the back of my booze cupboard the other day. I think it was when I was looking for a corkscrew. I don't know if you can see that reading. I assume that reading at the moment is giving us our ambient air temperature, which is apparently around 22 degrees. I think it's probably a bit warmer than that out of the shade. So let's put it in the, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that if I stick it in the glass, but put it in the glass and see what we get. You're probably not going to be able to read that, are you? Going down to 11. It's like the opposite of Spinal Tap. 10, 9, 9.7 we're at now. Is that as low as we're going? 9.7 seems to have stabilised at that. Opinions do seem to differ about ideal serving temperature for sparkling wines, but I don't know, the consensus seems to be somewhere in around 10 degrees or slightly lower. I've always thought actually slightly higher, that's better, but so I think we're actually in safe territory there. I don't think so far this has gone wrong. Still haven't really talked about how it tastes or smells or anything. Oh, this is going to be a long video. So that's quite a nice colour actually. It is deeper than I remember it, sort of bronzy rosé sort of colour. That's a bit more fuller colour than I remember. I thought I had a vague memory of it being paler than that. So that's nice. Red berry fruit there. Raspberries, strawberries. Might be a hint of red currant in there. Citrusy, but not lemony. Something sort of a sweeter kind of citrus than that. Maybe a hint of orange there. Something like orange. Maybe a little bit of something orchardy there as well. Possibly a tiny hint of something apple, like red apple, I suppose. That's nice. It's a pretty good start. On the palate, interestingly, I think the first thing I'm met with is more mineral character than zing. Usually the zing is the biggest hit. So again, I think looking at the general technical information of this wine, it usually rates as being slightly less acidic than the classic cuvee, and you'd expect that for something that's more Chardonnay dominant. Chardonnay tends to produce sort of slightly more acidic style. You know, white wines are generally slightly more acidic than red wines, aren't they? It's overall, I suppose, dry, but actually quite fruity. Definitely not noticing an excess of sugar there. Fruit-wise, more of that red berry fruit character on the palate, more strawberries, more raspberries. Again, I feel like I do get a little bit of red apple. There is a slight citrusy twang, but it's almost going a little bit marmalade-y now, I would say. It's more, yeah, orange zest, that sort of thing, rather than something really zingy like lemons. Has a nice texture to it, despite being perhaps a little bit less zingy than some other ESWs, I would say. It's really quite mouth-watering actually towards the end. I'm not getting a huge amount of autolytic character. Again, that technical information I think said that it had about 2 years, 2 and a little bit years on the lees. If I really dig for it, there might be a very subtle sort of bready or perhaps more brioche kind of hint. But this is much more a wine that trades in fruit, like a greengrocer on a market. It does have a really nice balance, relatively gentle zing here. I was getting a bit of floral character there. Well, that's interesting. Tiny hint of something like rose hip, perhaps. Rose or rose hip. A little bit saline now as well. Slight hint of something savoury character there. The mineral notes are kind of veering off into something a tiny bit saline. I don't think this is faulty in any way, which is a great relief. Despite its sort of dubious shelf position in the shop, I don't think that's had a damaging effect on the wine, and perhaps that's partly thanks to this amber or brownish sort of glass they use. I'm impressed at how I've managed to get the serving temperature down into an acceptable range with just 2 hours in the fridge and this ice jacket. I'm not sure if that really, as I say, has a huge effect other than just kind of stabilising it once it's out the fridge. And that is a bit nicer than I remember it. Definitely not sweet. They might have, you know, tweaked the recipe over the years. It's been a while since I last had a rosé Nyetimber. Second glass now, and I am getting here, which I wasn't noticing before, a slightly sort of dairy kind of note almost on the nose. Sometimes when I find that, I think that might actually be an autolytic thing, almost clotted cream-esque. But it's subtle, it's definitely not, you know, weird and over the top. Berry fruit character, absolutely lovely. It's good. Nice sky over there now. And, I think it might have disappeared already, but there was a rainbow over there just now. Seems a bit excessive, doesn't it? Rainbow and a sunset.